David, he's in the hospital, unconscious from an accident.
Linda cried out, her voice trembling with emotion. She stood before me, tears streaming down her face, a picture of despair and worry. I watched her, my heart strangely still amidst the storm of emotions. Is that so? Then please, go home? I replied, my voice calm yet distant. Linda's eyes locked onto mine, searching for something, perhaps a hint of concern or shock. But she found none. Her face flushed red with anger, a natural response considering her son, my husband, was lying in a hospital bed, his condition unknown. But deep within me, there was a reason, a poignant and profound reason, why I couldn't muster the slightest bit of worry or fear for David's fate. I am Emily, a 28-year-old housewife. My husband David, 2 years my senior, has taken over the reins of a small company from his predecessor, John. Although, in reality, Linda, his mother, still holds the reins as the CEO, making David more of an apprentice in the business. During the first year of our marriage, I have been tormented by his constant affairs with other women. Since the early days of our newlywed life, there have always been shadows of other women lingering around him. However, it seemed to be nothing more than casual dinners and drives with these women. I was certain that he met these women alone, but I had no concrete evidence to prove any deeper relationship. Was he being careful not to leave any evidence, or was he merely enjoying fleeting romances? Personally, I consider meeting another woman alone to be infidelity, but it doesn't amount to a full-blown affair. I am yet to grasp any solid proof of his adultery. I reached a point where I could no longer tolerate David's frequent outings with other women and even suggested divorce. If you want to play around with other women so much, why don't you just go back to being single? I confronted him.
Hey, it's just business meetings. You know. I didn't think you were so narrow-minded.
He retorted. Is it just my narrow-mindedness, then? I asked, my frustration growing.
Exactly. Entertaining clients is part of the job. It's just that they happen to be women. There's nothing dubious about it. But maybe you wouldn't understand, having only about 5 years of work experience,
he said, laughing cheerfully. His laugh, however, revealed his true thoughts.
I've given you, with almost no social experience, the status of a CEO's wife. You should be able to laugh off a little infidelity.
This very attitude made me more determined to find irrefutable evidence and confront him. Through my research, I learned that even if I confronted him about his affairs, it often wouldn't be considered solid proof of infidelity. Also, tampering with his smartphone to gather evidence would be illegal and inadmissible in court. On one of those days, filled with thoughts of there must be a way to deal with this, a significant opportunity presented itself. Perhaps David had become complacent because I had not yet caught him in the act, but finally, he made a slip.
I'm going on a business trip to New York next Friday. It'll be for 3 days, so please get my suitcase ready.
He casually mentioned. Understood. Shall I prepare your usual travel set and pack it in your suitcase? As always, I inquired, maintaining my usual demeanor.
No, I've got some confidential documents and stuff. I'll prepare it myself this time,
he replied, a slight deviation from his usual routine. And about the accommodation, is the hotel you usually use in New York fine? I asked, trying to gauge his reaction.
I'll handle the hotel arrangements too. Don't worry about it,
he assured, his tone a bit too dismissive. It struck me as odd. Throughout our marriage, whenever he claimed to be on business trips, I was always the one who prepared everything. This slight change in his behavior raised my suspicions. Could there be something more to this trip? I wondered. Curiosity piqued. I decided to check our home computer for clues. As expected, the browsing history was wiped clean, but I discovered a reservation confirmation from a travel site. It was for a stay at a ryokan, but not in New York, as he claimed. Instead, it was in a famous tourist destination in the opposite direction, and the reservation was for 2 adults. Although not definitive, it suggested he felt the need to lie about his destination. I had finally stumbled upon a significant lead. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to hire a detective. It wasn't enough to just prove he was meeting another woman. I needed irrefutable evidence of infidelity, such as them sharing the same room. In this situation, turning to a professional seemed like the most effective strategy. And so, the day arrived when David left for his business trip, or rather, his secretive getaway. The detective was instructed to follow David from the moment he left our house. That evening, I received a scheduled update from the detective, which confirmed my worst fears. He reported that David had stayed in the same room with a woman and shared intimate moments with her. captured in photographs taken in the car and at various tourist spots. Although I had braced myself for this, the news still sent a shock through me. I had thought obtaining proof would bring me a sense of clarity and relief, but perhaps a part of me still harbored feelings for my husband. That night, sleep eluded me. I spent the early hours staring into the sky, lost in thought. The following evening, I received an unexpected call from the detective agency, earlier than the usual update time. My heart raced with a sense of foreboding, and, as it turned out, my intuition was spot on. The detective informed me that David and the woman had been involved in an accident at their travel destination. Both were unconscious and had been urgently transported to a hospital. Ironically, it was the detective I had hired who was able to call for an ambulance promptly. Having become witnesses to the accident, the detectives were now involved in police inquiries and could no longer continue their surveillance.
Would you like us to arrange for another agent to continue, or?
The detective inquired. No need for further tailing. Can we shift the focus to investigating the woman's identity? I requested.
Certainly.
They replied. Thank you, I said, ending the call. No sooner had I hung up than the phone rang again. The call was from the hospital.
Are you a family member of Mr. David? There's been an incident.
Yes, David has been in an accident, right? I replied, already aware of the situation.
Yes, did the police contact you?
The voice on the other end sounded surprised. Something like that, I responded, my voice steadied due to the prior update from the detective agency. They must have found my calm response unusual.
It might be difficult for you to travel here, but we would appreciate it if you could come to the hospital as soon as possible.
It is indeed a long way. Quite troublesome, I replied evasively, sensing their growing suspicion. After a moment of hesitation, they urged,
Please, it's important.
Before ending the call, my head felt cloudy from lack of sleep, and even after their plea, I couldn't bring myself to move. As his wife, I knew there would be paperwork and consent forms for surgeries that would require my attention, but I couldn't muster the will to rush to the side of the man who betrayed me. As I pondered over what to do next, the doorbell rang. When I checked the camera, I saw Linda standing there. Linda, I murmured.
Emily, are you there? Can you come to the door, please?
Linda's voice sounded urgent. Yes, I replied, and opened the door. As soon as I let her in, Linda, with tears in her eyes, confronted me.
Emily, is it true that David is unconscious after an accident? The hospital called me after they spoke with you. They said you sounded odd,
she said, her voice laced with worry and confusion. Yes, it seems to be the case, I replied, my tone neutral.
Emily, are you okay? This sudden news must be shocking, but you need to stay strong right now,
Linda implored, trying to compose herself. I am fine, I reassured her.
Let's go to the hospital together. Are you ready?
Linda asked, wiping away her tears. I'm sorry, but please go back home. I'm not going to the hospital, I said, surprising her.
What do you mean? Don't say such absurd things,
Linda retorted, visibly upset. She shook my shoulders in frustration. It was understandable. Her son was in the hospital, unconscious, and here I was, as wife, showing no intention of concern or urgency. When Linda arrived, I explained to her, yesterday, David told me he was going on a business trip to New York. But he wasn't there, was he?
Business trip to New York. But the accident he had was in a completely different tourist destination,
Linda said, puzzled. Exactly. And you knew there was no such business trip planned, didn't you, Linda? I pointed out.
Yes, I did,
she admitted, her voice trailing off. Did you know that he was with another woman at the time of the accident? I asked.
What?
Linda's shock was evident. Yes, that woman is David's mistress. I'm quite certain of this based on the investigation I commissioned. We're still looking into her identity, but I expect to have answers soon, I informed her. Linda seemed to tremble as she processed this revelation. She must be torn between her love for her son and the betrayal he committed. I waited for her to respond, half expecting her to defend him, but instead, she knelt before me and deeply bowed her head.
Emily, I am so sorry for the pain you've endured because of my son,
she said, her voice filled with genuine remorse. Linda, please, get up. I don't want you to do this. The fault lies with our marriage, not with you, I implored her, feeling uncomfortable with her gesture. Despite my protests, Linda continued,
Please let me handle this situation. I promise not to let anything bad happen.
I hesitated, then agreed. All right, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you,
she said, bowing deeply again before leaving in the taxi. About 3 hours later, Linda called to inform me that David had regained consciousness and would be returning home in a couple of days after some routine checks. She asked about the detective's report, which I told her would be ready in about 5 days. Linda assured me she would handle everything before the report was completed. 2 days later, she called to say she had brought David home. The detective's report wasn't ready yet, but Linda suggested we wait for it before having a discussion. Despite my anxiety about how things would unfold, I agreed to wait for the report.
Until then, Emily, make sure you get some proper rest. What lies ahead is a battle of will and physical strength.
Lindy advised me with a tone that was both caring and firm. Her words caught me off guard, prompting me to ask, "But why? Why are you on my side?"
Why? Because I despise dishonesty. Can you accept that for now?
Linda replied, her eyes revealing a mix of resolve and sincerity. "But David is your son," I pointed out, feeling a bit conflicted.
Just because he's my son doesn't mean I can excuse everything he does,
she said, her voice tinged with disappointment and strength. Her words resonated with me, and I decided to trust her. A week after the accident, I received the investigative report from the detective agency. The meeting, as proposed by Linda, was to be held in the company's boardroom. The atmosphere was tense, with Linda and the board members seated at the head of the table, exuding an air of seriousness. David sat at the other end, his large frame visibly shrunken under the weight of his guilt. Next to him was the woman from the detective's photos, looking pale and downtrodden, her face marked with traces of the accident but still evidently beautiful. Despite the ordeal, they both appeared physically unharmed. If either of them had been wrapped in bandages, perhaps I might have felt more lenient. I mused to myself.
Emily, please take a seat here.
Linda directed me to a chair, her voice bringing me back to the moment. As I sat down, I noticed an unfamiliar man seated nearby.
This is Michael, Natalie's husband.
Linda introduced. I remembered the name Natalie from the detective's report. She was the other woman, and also married. Addressing Michael, I said, "I'm David's wife. I apologize for this situation."
"No, the apology should be mine."
He responded, his demeanor apologetic.
We'll be recording this conversation. David, start talking. Tell the truth, no lies.
Linda commanded authoritatively, causing David to tremble with fear.
Where should I begin?
David hesitated.
Start from the very beginning, everything.
Linda insisted.
Yes.
David complied, beginning his account of his affair with Natalie, his voice breaking at times. David recounted how he and Natalie had known each other since their student days and started dating. They had split up once but reignited their old flame at a class reunion. At the time, Natalie was already married, and David, out of jealousy, decided to marry me just to make her envious. Indeed, their affair intensified, fueled by jealousy and deceit. To me, their relationship was nothing but a cruel joke. To cover up his affair with Natalie and fuel her jealousy further, David had been meeting various women. His plan was to keep me oblivious to his main affair with Natalie, finding amusement in my ignorance. However, their carelessness on a trip provided me with undeniable evidence, and the accident at the trip's destination brought everything to light. It felt like divine retribution. As David finished his confession, Linda exclaimed in disgust,
This child has only inherited the worst traits of his father.
She glared at David and Natalie, who cringed under her gaze.
So, you admit to the affair?
Linda pressed.
Yes.
David replied meekly.
Fine, we will discuss your position at the company in the board meeting and inform you later.
Linda stated firmly.
But it's just an affair. If Emily forgives me, there shouldn't be a problem.
David protested weakly. Why would you think I'd forgive you? And you're forgetting about Michael, I pointed out.
That's...
David stammered, his confidence faltering.
"I have no intention of forgiving either."
Michael added sternly. Linda then took over.
As David's mother, I will say this. Be quiet, David. You have no allies here.
Mom, please be on my side.
David pleaded.
Silence. No one is on your side.
Linda snapped.
Emily, Michael, I've suffered through my husband's infidelity as well. I know the procedures well. Let's handle this without any mercy.
Linda proposed with a resolve that resonated with strength and solidarity. David had assumed that as a housewife, I wouldn't go as far as to divorce him. However, I informed him that I had already started working from home and was financially stable, which visibly shattered him. With the help of the detective's report and Linda's support, both Michael and I were able to secure fair settlements from David and Natalie, culminating in our divorces. David faced the consequences of his actions. He was ousted from his position as president by the board and cut off by Linda. Now, he likely endures the stigma of his past while attempting to rebuild his career elsewhere. Natalie, burdened with a significant debt from the alimony payments to us, found herself without a place even in her own family home. She's now living a life of repayment, working live-in jobs to clear her debts. After David's exit, Linda took over his role in addition to her own, energized and more active than ever. Even years after the divorce, every time I see her, she seems to become increasingly youthful and vibrant. Witnessing Linda's resilience and strength, I find myself inspired and motivated not to be outdone. This dramatic turn of events taught me a lot about resilience, justice, and moving forward with strength.